Dr. Philippa Whitefield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and if I can congratulate you on your new position in the big comfy chair. Hopefully you've got your feet up on the footstool. I beg to move the amendment in the name of my right honourable friend from Rossguy and Lochaber. But before that, I would like to thank all the staff of the Bills Office and the clerks for the support they have given right across the House in helping obviously put the bills together, but also helping members to draw up and submit amendments, which is no easy thing for many of us. And particularly they have had to do this through all the stages of Brexit legislation, and I think all of us should be thanking them for their work. However, despite all the triumphalism we see, understandably, after winning the election in England, we see in this Prime Minister's deal the potential of a repeat of the Brexit saga of the last 3.5 years, as through hubris he's actually making similar mistakes to his predecessor. She painted herself into a corner with her own red lines before carrying out an economic assessment to decide what form of Brexit would be the least damaging. There's been no economic assessment whatsoever on this deal. The last one was in 2018 on the Chequers Cake and Eat It plan, which was such a fairy tale you could actually hear the unicorns galloping down Whitehall. The former Prime Minister launched the Article 50 process with its fixed end date and the clock ticking all the time without a Scooby as to what the UK actually wanted to ask for from the EU. This Prime Minister has made it illegal to extend transition, despite the fact that 11 months is a ridiculously short time to negotiate even a basic free trade deal, let alone the complex shopping list of the political declaration. She kept her cards close to her chest, so Parliament had no input or influence on the withdrawal deal as it developed. The removal of Clause 31 from this bill means Parliament, and indeed devolved governments, will have no influence on the future relationship with the EU, despite the impact on all of our constituents and local industries. The former Prime Minister was then terribly shocked that when she finally produced her deal, it was such a flop, drawn like a lifeless rabbit out of a hat, and rejected by those on both sides of the Brexit debate, including the current Prime Minister. Members of this House are being sidelined and can therefore only wonder what the future relationship will look like when it's eventually unveiled in December. I will give way.
I'd just like to say to begin with how much I respect the honourable lady. She sits on the committee which I've had the honour to chair for some time. I simply say this, that with regard to the question of the way in which the negotiations were conducted, as she knows we've been conducting our own investigation into that, one of the things that we made, a very important point we made, was that the terms and conditions were set by the European Union and accepted by the UK. That will change now as a result of this general election result. I just thought I'd make that observation.
Thank the right honourable gentleman, for his contribution, and I would certainly say that I think the tone was set when we saw that first meeting for the former Brexit Secretary, I can't remember his constituency, when he turned up with not a piece of paper in his hand to meet the negotiators of the EU. I think that was rather naive. However, back to the former Prime Minister. Early in her premiership, she spoke of consulting across the House and across the UK before she went to Europe. But she never did. This Prime Minister has sought no common ground whatsoever within this Parliament or with the devolved nations, despite the fact that 2 of them voted to remain. Brexit was never defined during the referendum. Indeed, Nigel Farage and some of the most ardent Brexiteers suggested that, of course, the UK would stay in the single market. It would be madness to leave. They just wanted to get back to a common market. The Scottish Government's report, Scotland's Place in Europe, put forward as early as December 16, so 3 months before the Article 50 letter was sent, the compromise proposal that the UK should stay in the single market and customs union. With a 52 to 48 referendum result, this might even have provided the basis of a compromise between Leavers, who did not want closer political union, and Remainers, who wanted to keep as many EU benefits as possible. However, if England and Wales wanted to diverge further, the proposal was that Scotland and Northern Ireland should be allowed to stay in the single market and customs union, which would have respected how those nations voted. Sadly, those proposals were dismissed by the government out of hand, and the fact 62% of Scottish voters voted to remain has been completely ignored. Yep. No quarter given, no compromise offered. Indeed, Scotland and the majority of her elected representatives have been treated with growing disrespect in this place over the last 3.5 years. And I would just gently point out, we do actually have television and internet in Scotland, and this is actually being seen by the Scottish people. Our request for a devolved, or at least regionalised, immigration process after Brexit has also been dismissed, despite Scotland's demographic need for immigration. We have to be able to ensure EU citizens who've made their home in Scotland, and including my other half, can stay without being exposed to the notorious hostile environment of the Home Office. Yeah. But in the future, we also need to be able to attract immigrants from Europe and across the world. With the risk to our public services and key industries like tourism and farming, and the threat of depopulation in the Highlands and Islands, this UK government is certainly not acting in Scotland's interests. The UK government has already taken the overall power to set the rules in 24 areas of devolved competence. All the Scottish and Welsh governments requested was that any new UK frameworks should be agreed rather than imposed. The Tory government refused. Hardly the respect agenda we used to hear so much about. With the inclusion of fishing, farming, food standards, food safety and food labelling, as well as public procurement, it's clear this is about being able to tie up Scotland and sell it out in a trade deal. Yep. This paragraph already drives a coach and horses through the Scotland Act. But in voting down my simple amendment to protect the Devolution Acts from sweeping delegated powers yesterday, we see a government taking power to alter the devolution settlement without even parliamentary scrutiny. Yep. Last night, the Scottish Parliament voted 92 to 29 to withhold legislative consent from this bill, due to the risk it poses both to Scotland and the current devolution settlement. Ignoring this voice and riding roughshod over the legislative consent process after 20 years of devolution will undermine the very union the members opposite protest to hold so dear. Yep. Yeah.